Okay, so get ready for this, because today we're doing a deep dive into the Book of Ruth.
Book of Ruth.
Yeah, but through a bit of a different lens.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What do you mean?
We're going to be looking at it through the lens of like a modern millennial prayer.
Wow, that's a really unique approach.
So we'll be blending, the biblical narrative with maybe some current events
Yeah,
and even social media trends for good measure.
that's really cool. I like that.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. So basically, the central question we're trying to answer here is,
Yeah.
how might a millennial who's like deeply rooted in their faith,
Mm.
you know,
Mm.
express their connection to Yahweh
Okay.
while also acknowledging all the complexities of like the modern world?
Absolutely.
And to help us kind of unpack all of this, we have
Yeah.
an expert joining us today
Hello.
who has a background in, well, biblical studies, but also, contemporary cultural trends.
Yeah, trying to bridge that gap.
Yeah, I'm really excited to,
It's a fun gap to bridge.
to have your insights throughout this whole discussion.
Yeah.
So to kick things off, we actually asked a millennial,
Like
someone who's like,
Sure.
deeply rooted in their faith, to write a prayer
Okay.
reflecting on Ruth's journey. And it's pretty awesome.
I'd love to hear it.
Okay, so it starts off, Yahweh, it's me again, just trying to navigate this crazy world.
Uh-huh.
One avocado toast and existential crisis at a time.
That's so relatable.
Right. I was reading about Ruth today, and wow, talk about a woman who knew how to handle a life-altering plot twist,
Mm-hmm.
leaving everything behind to journey to a new land.
Yeah.
That's like the ultimate leap of faith. I can barely commit to a dinner reservation a week in advance.
Oh my gosh, yes.
So good, right?
That's so true.
I mean, Ruth chose loyalty and family
Mm-hmm.
over comfort and familiarity.
Right.
She didn't have a luxury of like endless scrolling through options on, whatever app,
Absolutely.
or relying on a GPS to like guide her every move.
Yeah.
It's pretty wild.
Yeah. It really highlights, I think, like a deeper longing for connection
Yeah,
and purpose that like transcends time and technology.
totally. And the prayer goes on to say, seriously, Yahweh, how did she do it?
Right.
No Google Maps,
Ugh.
no social media support groups, just pure grit and a whole lot of trust in you.
Yeah.
And then it says, and speaking of trust, can we talk about her devotion to Naomi? Hashtag relationship goals.
Oh, I love that.
In a world of ghosting and situationships, that kind of unwavering loyalty is like finding a vintage vinyl in a sea of Spotify playlists, rare and precious.
Wow, that analogy is spot on.
I know, right?
It really highlights that contrast between the like fleeting nature of modern relationships
Yeah.
and like the depth of commitment that Ruth's demonstrated.
It makes you wonder, are we so overwhelmed by like choices and distractions now
Yeah.
that we've lost sight of the beauty of just like deep, lasting connections?
It's a good question.
And I think, the Book of Ruth really invites us to kind of ponder that.
To think about it more deeply, for sure.
Yeah. And then the prayer continues. Yahweh, I'm praying for a little bit of that Ruth energy in my own life. Help me to be brave, to choose love over fear, even when it feels like the wilderness is closing in.
Wow.
And hey, if you could throw in a Boaz-like figure somewhere along the way,
Uh-huh.
that would be amazing.
Yeah.
Just saying.
There's a vulnerability there, but also like a sense of humor
Totally.
that I find really endearing.
Yeah, it's very genuine. And it's not just about finding a romantic partner either.
Yeah.
It's about that deeper yearning for belonging, for like a community that embraces you, flaws and all.
Absolutely.
Like finding your tribe, your people,
Your people.
the ones who understand your struggles and celebrate your victories, just like Ruth.
Yeah,
She found acceptance and love in a community that initially seemed so foreign to her.
exactly.
It's powerful stuff.
Yeah.
So that prayer really sets the stage for our deep dive into like the Book of Ruth.
Yeah, definitely.
So the Book of Ruth takes place, during a time of famine and like social upheaval in Israel.
It was a really difficult time.
Not exactly like a thriving economy with avocado toast on every corner.
Right. It was a time of like real scarcity.
And uncertainty.
The Israelites were kind of facing a crisis of faith.
Oh.
They were struggling to understand, their covenant with God
Yeah.
amidst all this like hardship.
I mean, kind of like how today we're grappling with,
Yeah.
climate change and economic inequality
Yeah.
and this 2047 news cycle.
Absolutely. I think there are some interesting parallels there.
For sure.
And just like Naomi and her family had to migrate to Moab
Yeah.
out of desperation. You know, so many people today are being displaced by conflict, poverty, all these things.
It's true. It's like those themes of displacement and the search for belonging, they're like just as relevant today as they were back then.
Absolutely. And it's important to remember that Moab,
Yeah.
where they went, was like a neighboring nation
Yeah.
with its own like distinct culture and religious practices.
So not exactly like a warm welcome for outsiders.
Right. There were definitely some cultural and religious tensions
Gotcha.
between the Israelites and the Moabites.
Interesting.
You know, things like intermarriage, for example,
Yeah.
were viewed with a lot of suspicion.
And yet that's exactly what happens.
I know, right?
Naomi's sons, they marry Moabite women,
Yeah.
Orpah, and of course Ruth.
It's like the ancient equivalent of falling in love with someone
Totally.
from a completely different background.
It's so interesting.
It really raises questions about like identity and assimilation. How do we navigate, you know, belonging to different cultures?
It's something that so many people can relate to today,
Absolutely, especially millennials.
especially those from immigrant families.
Yeah, for sure.
Or people who have, lived and worked in different countries.
It's about finding that balance
Yeah.
between honoring your heritage,
Mm-hmm.
but also embracing new experiences.
Okay, so then tragedy strikes.
Yeah.
Naomi's husband and both of her sons die,
It's heartbreaking.
leaving her, Orpah, and Ruth as widows
Yeah.
in this foreign land.
In a society where, you know, a woman's security really depended on her male relatives,
Right.
widowhood was a particularly vulnerable position.
It's like suddenly losing your whole support system.
Absolutely. And Naomi, heartbroken, decides to go back to Bethlehem.
Okay.
It's a decision born out of desperation, but also like, yeah, a tiny little flicker of hope.
Wow.
You know, she's returning to her roots, to her people,
Yeah.
hoping for some community and support.
But she urges Orpah and Ruth to stay in Moab.
Yes.
To rebuild their lives, find new husbands.
It was such a selfless act,
It's true.
recognizing how hard it would be for them as
Huh.
widows in that society.
And Orpah chooses to stay.
Understandably.
But then there's Ruth.
And she utters those like iconic words
I know.
that have resonated through history.
Where you go, I will go. And where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people.
And your God, my God.
So powerful.
Ruth is choosing to embrace the unknown,
Hmm.
to stand by Naomi, even if it means facing hardship.
It's a level of commitment that's like
Right.
almost unimaginable today.
It's amazing.
Like in today's world of fleeting connections and all that.
Exactly.
And don't forget, Ruth is making this choice as a Moabite woman.
Right, in a society that viewed outsiders with so much suspicion.
She's risking everything.
It's an act of incredible courage.
So they arrive in Bethlehem, two widows starting from scratch.
Yeah.
It's harvest time.
Mm-hmm.
And Ruth, being the resourceful woman that she is,
She was.
she takes advantage of that ancient Israelite custom of gleaning.
Right, gleaning was like a form of social welfare back then. Safety net for the poor and the vulnerable.
It's interesting how that ancient practice has modern day parallels.
Yeah, I mean, think about food banks, social assistance programs.
Community gardens.
Yeah, all these things designed to address food insecurity.
It speaks to this enduring need for social safety nets.
Absolutely.
And it's during this act of gleaning that Ruth's story takes another turn.
Yes, because she ends up gleaning in the field of Boaz.
Enter the leading man,
Right.
this
Yeah.
wealthy landowner,
A man of standing in the community.
and as we'll find out later, a relative of Naomi's deceased husband.
It's like a chance encounter.
That changes everything.
Yeah, it's a good reminder that even in the middle of hardship,
Mm-hmm.
unexpected opportunities can pop up.
And Boaz, he immediately notices Ruth, right?
Yeah, he's impressed by her work ethic.
Her humility,
Yeah.
her devotion to Naomi.
He sees her worth,
Mm-hmm.
and he chooses to treat her with kindness and respect.
He goes above and beyond, right?
Absolutely.
He instructs his workers to leave extra grain for Ruth.
It's an act of generosity and compassion.
He's challenging those social norms.
Yeah, he's recognizing her humanity.
And Naomi, she sees the significance of this connection. She sees Boaz as a potential kinsman redeemer for Ruth.
Right. That term might sound a little strange,
It kind of does.
but it was a really important concept in ancient Israel.
So break it down for us. What does it mean?
Okay, so basically a kinsman redeemer
Yeah.
was a close relative who had a duty to protect
Okay.
vulnerable family members like widows and orphans.
Interesting.
They could buy back family property,
Oh, okay.
pay off debts, even marry a widow to ensure the continuation of the family line.
So, A combination of a social worker and a financial advisor.
Haha. Yeah, something like that.
And Naomi sees Boaz as like the perfect candidate for this role.
She does.
It's a chance for Ruth to like, find security and rebuild her life.
And to carry on the legacy of her deceased husband.
But how does she make this happen?
Well, Naomi is a smart woman.
Right.
She comes up with a plan that follows the social customs of the time.
What's the plan?
She tells Ruth to go to the threshing floor at night.
Okay.
Where Boaz is working.
The threshing floor at night. This sounds a little...
I know, it sounds a little scandalous, right?
Yeah.
But remember, this is ancient Israel. Customs were very different back then.
So what happens at the threshing floor?
Okay, so Ruth goes there. She finds Boaz sleeping, and she uncovers his feet.
She uncovers his feet?
It was a symbolic act.
Interesting.
A way of appealing to his sense of duty as a kinsman redeemer.
That's a pretty bold move.
It was culturally acceptable back then.
Okay.
It was a way for a woman to signal her interest in marriage.
So how does Boaz react to this?
Well, obviously he's startled, but once he understands what Ruth is asking, he's really moved by her courage and her willingness to honor her deceased husband's family.
He's not totally opposed to marrying her, I'm guessing?
He praises her character, her loyalty to Naomi, but being an honorable man, he realizes that there's another relative who's technically closer in line.
To be the kinsman redeemer.
Yeah.
A plot twist.
So we're left hanging what happens next.
We'll have to find out in the next part of our deep dive.
Okay, so last time we left off, Boaz was like ready to be Ruth's kinsman redeemer.
Yeah.
But there was this other relative who had like a stronger claim.
Right, so it gets a little complicated.
A little bit of a love triangle situation.
Kinda.
So what happens next?
Well, Boaz, he wants to do things the right way.
Okay.
He's a man of principle. So he goes to the city gate.
The city gate?
Yeah, it's like the ancient equivalent of a courthouse.
Interesting.
And he calls a meeting.
So no elopement? No, like, dramatic declarations of love?
Not quite. He's all about following the rules.
Okay.
So he gathers everyone, including the other relative, and he lays out the situation.
Yeah.
You know, Naomi needs to sell her deceased husband's land.
Right.
And as a kinsman redeemer, this other relative has the first right of refusal.
Makes sense, protecting family property and all.
Exactly.
But where does Ruth fit into all of this? Well, here's the clever part. Boaz kind of hints that buying the land also means you have to marry Ruth.
Wow. Talk about a high-stakes deal.
It is a package deal.
Land and a wife.
So what does the other relative say?
I'm on the edge of my seat.
Well, at first he's interested in the land.
Okay.
But when he hears about the marriage part, he hesitates.
Because of Ruth.
Yeah, remember, she's a Moabite woman.
Right.
Marrying outside your tribe, that was a big taboo back then.
So he's like, land, great. Wife, not so much.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
He's worried about what people will think and diluting his family line by marrying a foreigner.
Wow, so he actually, like, turns it down.
He does. Publicly, he declines the offer.
Leaving Boaz free to step in.
Exactly.
Boaz gets the land, Indy the girl.
What a twist.
Talk about a happy ending.
Well, almost.
What do you mean?
The story doesn't really tell us how Ruth felt about all this.
Oh, that's true.
You don't hear her side of the story.
I guess we get so caught up in, like, the romance and the legal stuff. We forget that Ruth is the one whose future's being decided.
It's a good reminder of the complexities of women's lives back then.
Yeah.
Their choices were often limited.
But it seems like things work out for Ruth in the end.
They do. She marries Boaz.
Mm-hmm.
They have a son named Obed.
Okay.
And get this, Obed becomes the grandfather of King David.
Wow, from Moabite widow to great-grandmother of a king.
What a journey.
It's like the ultimate underdog story.
It really shows that God can work through any circumstance to accomplish his purposes.
Her story is really inspiring.
It is. It's about faith.
Loyalty.
Resilience.
It makes you think about how we can embody those qualities in our own lives.
Absolutely. How can we be more like Ruth? Choose love over fear. Embrace the unknown.
And trust that even when things are tough, God's got us.
I love that.
Maybe we can all be kinsman redeemers in our own way.
Yeah, looking out for those in need.
Offering support, extending grace.
Beautiful.
It's a powerful message and one that's so relevant today.
The Book of Ruth. It might be ancient, but it still speaks to us.
It reminds us that even in a world that feels divided, there's always hope.
And room for redemption and second chances.
So that wraps up our deep dive into the Book of Ruth.
It's been a pleasure exploring this with you.
Thanks for joining us.
And thanks for listening, everyone.
Until next time, keep diving deep.